I'm so.
You're so horrible.
But you heard it, right? When you said it, you heard it, right?
I heard it, but I didn't mean it. I don't know why my English functions this way. It's like I'm a horny old man.
I mean, if it's true, it's true. You know, I think that's something that you just maybe need to acknowledge.
Well, I will acknowledge one of those two things, not both of them.
What, that you're old?
Yeah.
This is now officially a roast of each other, so. Hi, everyone. Scott and Matty here.
Hi.
And welcome to Queer as Pop, the podcast where we discuss all things queer and how they intersect with pop culture, politics, and top headlines. Matty, how are you today?
I'm very upset because this is our last episode for the season. So I'm in mourning right now.
Well, we're not done yet. How can you be grieving the carcass if we're not even done yet?
I know. It's been an amazing 12 episodes so far, and I hope that everyone who has been listening have been really, really excited about what we've been able to present, and we've had so many amazing guests, and I've been so fulfilled from this experience. So I'm really happy for everything working out so good, and I'm excited for our future episodes because we will be coming back.
Yeah. I mean, just think of season 2 as being even bigger, even better, even more ridiculous. But I agree. You know, this first season of ours has been such an incredible journey so far. You know, it has exceeded my wildest expectations of what we could accomplish. You know, especially for being two people that didn't know each other too well when we started off.
Exactly. No, I was like when I started this project, I was the hardest part was to find someone that would have the same passion and same vision that I had, and
then you found me, so I apologize.
And then I found you. but yeah, it's been an amazing trip when I first got approached by this or to do this.
Yeah, maybe give people a little bit of background. So, like, what was the sort of genesis of this for you?
So basically, I was approached by an LGBTQ organization to do something for the community, or find a way to enrich the community and educate the community and make things better, not just for the LGBTQ family in Sweden, but for the rest of the world. So I had a few ideas that I was brainstorming, and I came to the conclusion that, you know, there aren't actually that many LGBTQ centric podcasts that could achieve what I wanted to see in a podcast. That sounds like I have hubris, but basically, I was looking for a podcast that could give me what I wanted, and I realized that I had to create it for myself, and that it functioned well with the vision that they had for this, and that's how Queer as Pop started. And then I had to go forward to find someone to do this with. And I knew that I wanted this to be an international platform. I didn't want the podcast to just be Swedish, even though I asked some Swedish colleagues and friends to do this with me that were within the LGBTQIA plus spectrum. So I went ahead and tweeted about it and got approached by a few people. And one of them was Scott. And I got super excited that you reached out. And even though we only had interacted very little, I had a sense, and I knew that you were someone that would function well with me. So when it came down to 3 people, I chose you. and I have zero regrets about it. And it's been an amazing journey that I hope that we can keep on doing, because so far it's been mind-blowingly fun, and especially getting to know you has been, not to put down our guests, but getting to know you has been the best part, in my opinion.
Aw, I appreciate that. If I weren't dead on the inside, I would be absolutely blushing right now. So, no, no. I mean, all kidding aside, I was thrilled when I put my name in the hat, that you thought I had, sort of a complementary element to what you'd be bringing to the podcast, so that we could, play off each other well and turn this into something that was fun and interesting for everybody to listen to.
Yeah, that was basically what I wanted, even from the start. And even though we are, when it comes to values, I think you and I are very same as people, but we operate kind of differently. And I think that that difference plays to our advantage. And I find myself being very comfortable sharing this space with you, and that's something that can be really hard to achieve with when you do something like this with someone else.
Yeah, especially with the reality that we have actually never met in real life. We
Exactly.
exist and know each other exclusively through an online dynamic. And so, being able to find that and cultivate that type of a relationship is tough, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong in that discovery process of each other. And so I've just
Yeah,
been feeling very fortunate that, you know, to your point, that there's lots of value systems that we share, and while we may operate a little bit differently in certain ways, we still communicate well enough to overcome any challenges and also thrive together.
exactly. And I feel that we've been able to do that, and both you and I have had um, experiences throughout this year that have shaped us a lot. And just like everyone else struggling with whatever changes in our lives that happened because of COVID, I think that those were healthy changes for a lot of people in a way. It was a wake up call, I believe, and it gave me the opportunity and motivation to actually go forward and do things that I would never normally do, which is this podcast, for instance. In my normal space, in my normal life, I probably never would have thought about it. But yeah, you find ways to go forward and find inspiration into doing things, and this has certainly been one of the highlights of the year for me.
Yeah, I feel so fortunate that these past few months we've had the opportunity to talk to some really fascinating people. Because to your point, when you're cooped up inside, with the pandemic going on, with social distancing and businesses closed, it really does limit your life and what you're accustomed to. And so the fact that I've had this outlet to not only meet but speak with and be able to present, very interesting viewpoints and stories from, a lot of different people, it's been a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah, and this was always the vision that I had in mind, that we would be able to make something fun out of this, but also take the opportunity to educate people and give perspectives of famous individuals within the LGBTQIA plus community that maybe things that they haven't shared before, and be a bit more personal about it. And that's exactly what I wanted, and I feel that we've been able to achieve that, and I'm super proud of it.
Me too. Me too.
So, I was going to ask you, Scott, if we look back at our guest list throughout these 12 episodes, I want to discuss with you a little bit about what were the most memorable moments that you felt you had with these guests.
Yeah, I do have a few in mind. I mean, there's been so many, like winnowing it down was tough. But the first one I would love for you to listen to is actually a little clip right here by Lovette, which to me speaks to accountability.
One word: accountability. Nobody's saying people have to be perfect and never make mistakes. In making mistakes, you can find the right path of your activism or the change you want to see in the world. So accountability is number one in what I want to see, people not being defensive or in denial, but just seeing reality as it is for all people. Because we cannot work against racism, xenophobia, or social exclusion of any minority unless there's accountability, unless there's understanding, unless there's willingness to be uncomfortable. We cannot fear being uncomfortable, because that is the detriment of society moving forward. I have never seen anything change for the better by us pretending it's great as it is. So I would say that is number one.
Yeah.
And so hopefully with that clip right there, one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight it was the fact that Lovette spoke about very passionately and very eloquently this idea that, as we navigate life, we're going to come across moments where we might be wrong, or that we have to adapt our perceptions with new knowledge. And the fact that you should have the courage and strength to admit sometimes that you're wrong, actually acknowledge it and learn from it, and then move forward with a new sense of strength because you're operating from a more informed space, I 100% loved. And it was just, having her say that was just very powerful to me.
Yeah, I consider her a very dear friend, and she's certainly enriched my life in a lot of ways. So I was happy that we could have her on, and she makes some points that are very she's very conscious about not only the way she operates when it comes to fighting for marginalized people, but also about the faults that she does herself and what she contributes with. And I'm very inspired by that.
I love that.
So I think on my end, I think that one of the moments that were one of the most touching moments for me was probably when we had Janae marry Croc on the podcast, and when she was talking about her struggles coming out. So we can listen to the clip here.
Ended up splitting up, and that was only one of many factors. I mean, we had a lot of issues that people married 10 years with young kids have, but basically at that point I started coming out to family and friends, and initially it was super difficult. My first close friend that I told, it literally took me 3 months of conversations to come out to him, and I was so terrified of losing all my friends, losing my family. I didn't think anyone would accept me. And at this point, I was nearing the peak of my powerlifting career. So on one hand, I'm on the cover of magazines. I've got tons of fans all over the world, and things are going really well. But the more success I experienced, the more difficult it felt to come out. Like, I felt like everyone had put me up on this pedestal. I was this kid from this small town that had a number of areas, and I heard there were posters of me up in my old high school, and but the more that grew, the more difficult it became, and I felt like I was going to be disappointing everyone, that I was going to destroy this image of what everyone had of me and just let all these people down. And so it was just, I felt this immense pressure not to come out. And but I just got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. I actually was considering suicide, and it got to a really dark place because I just didn't see any way my life was ever going to work out. And I didn't think anyone would ever love me, that I could really be in a healthy relationship. And it was really difficult for quite a while. And but I slowly started coming out to friends, and fortunately, everyone was supportive. And I have an amazing group of friends that I still have to this day, and they were all supportive. A lot of my family was, but the family had mixed reactions. My mom and dad didn't take the news very well. For anyone who's seen the documentary, it's titled Transformer, and it's available on Netflix. And it basically follows me for the 2 years. I was outed publicly in 2015, and the documentary follows me for the 2 years after that. But my 3 sons, I had told them when they were very young, when they were 2, 4, and 6, so they knew their whole lives. So for them growing up, it was just part of who I am. And I think it really helped establish a really close bond between us. And there's a lot of trust there and love. And they've always been super supportive. So that's been amazing for me.
And this moment actually made me almost cry because it was so, I could hear the pain in her voice. And to a certain extent, as LGBTQIA plus individuals, we can understand the struggle. But like we've discussed before, when it comes to trans individuals, being trans is not you cannot hide it. It is out there, and you have no way to operate without having to deal with other people's perceptions of you and accept the hard parts and the struggles that entails to be trans. And that moment for me was when I started to connect with her and on an emotional level really understand the struggle that she went through with herself and the fears surrounding her family and friends as well in that process.
Yeah, I really resonated with a lot of her conversation and her story because she definitely had this narrative of she's an ever evolving person and always re-examining who she is and who she wants to be, and to do it so publicly and so with such activism and sort of a mindset towards education, I really admired from her, because that's not easy, and just to be that vulnerable, I admire so much for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything else that you would like to share?
Yeah. So another clip that I love that I want to share with you right now is from Mistress Fox. So let's take a listen.
But if you were listening, if you saw 3,000 votes, I think it's pretty clear that our community is asking for something very specifically.
Yeah.
So I try not to vilify people in that right, but even then, I've seen people like you, Scott, who didn't even retweet it yourself. But we're not personally connected, so it's not something I'm going to point at you and say, well, how dare you? Because again, I don't want this to be this thing where the gay community looks at me and says, well, she's just so loud and so aggressive, and I don't understand why she's being so combative, because we're really just trying to be heard.
Yeah, I think that you bring up some very valid criticisms, and I know that you're not trying to target necessarily me or the Rainbow Arcade specifically. It's just a valid criticism of how the optics work in terms of both getting the types of visibility with the platforms that we have to the people that need to be heard. And so it's a very valid criticism. And I think that, I myself am obviously far from perfect, and I'm always trying to learn. And I definitely want to use this as a moment for myself to be both more thoughtful and also, to your point, a better actual ally, not truly in just a performative sense. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's hard because even in your situation, I think I end up at the point where I'm harder on people with larger platforms for obvious reasons.
So as you can tell, I was rightly called out. And why I bring this one up, because it was another eye opener for me. There is this idea of allyship, and we want to be allies to others that we care about, but sometimes we just don't do it correctly, and we're coming from either a place of complacence or lack of education. And so having Mistress Fox sort of call out, my lack of using my platform and my resources to be a more vocal advocate for, some very significant and topical issues going on right now. She was absolutely right to give me that read, and it was good, because I just had to sit there and listen, accept my failings right then, and figure out for myself how I wanted to correct that behavior moving forward.
Yeah, it goes back a lot to what Lovette was saying, and I admire you for being able to take it as well as you did, and also I admire her for having such a strong voice and not backing down, because in the position that she's in, I fully understand and appreciate the strength you need to have to call out things that maybe we're doing wrong within this community. Maybe we're not accommodating and taking care of each other the way we should. And I love that she brought that up.
Yeah. It was really special to have her on and just hear about the issues that she's very, very mindful of, and what she does on a daily basis to be, educating others and calling out, platforms, organizations, people to be more supportive, to be more active allies. Do you have another clip that you'd like to share?
Yeah, and it's for probably one of the greatest moments for me doing this podcast, and that is when that we actually were able to have Miss Coco Peru on, because I've been such a huge fan of her for such a long time, and it's easy to have a conversation with her because she's so open about everything. And there was one part that stuck out the most for me that I didn't know much about, so we'll take a listen.
Here I am in a gay bar where you have to secretly knock to get in. And this drag performer, who's like the ultimate queer, thing, is celebrated. So that left a big influence on me, because I realized there's something about just not only coming out, but then taking everything you've taught to hate about yourself and celebrating it, that people are drawn to. They respect the courage. And then I read a book about two-spirited people, Native American, in the Native American culture. And that, for the first time, I felt like, oh my God, I have a history. I am reading what I felt as a child, that I wasn't a boy or a girl. I was always kind of both. And that cemented it for me, wanting to be an activist / entertainer, wanting to be like Charles Busch and write my own shows and create my life, celebrate my New York accent, be a two-spirited person, and, have the courage that this queen had in Peru. It just came together. And I said, I'm a drag queen one day. And as soon as I said that, it was like this bolt of lightning hit me and my life became clear.
And this part was so interesting to me because I started to understand the concept of drag even more when she actually talked about this concept that she perceives Coco more like an entity that already exists within her, and this duality of her existence, which I find so interesting, and understanding that drag is so much more than just a job, or it's such a complicated way of self-expression that is so individual to each and every one who practices it. And I find it so inspiring to that we had the chance to understand more of the depth that comes along with being a drag artist.
Yeah, I think that it was eye-opening for me when she spoke about this, because it was helping educate me again on a misconception I sometimes have about someone that does drag, and sort of the persona or the person that they're donning right at that moment to provide either entertainment or insight, or as a creative outlet in some capacity. And to have her sort of show that it's deeper and much more built in for her was incredible. And again, just eye-opening for me, because I acknowledge that I sometimes take for granted really what this person is for certain artists out there that we maybe just look at the surface and then don't look deeper for.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, for me, when I wasn't educated on this, drag was basically just a job. It was a performative act, nothing else. But it is so much more complex, and I appreciate that we got to see that side of Coco as well. So, do you have anything that you want to summarize for us with the last one that we're gonna go through?
Yeah, I think that we were both touched by Coco in a very important way in different episodes. The last episode that we just had with Peaches, Trixie, and Coco Peru, sorry.
Oh wow, that's a trauma.
Exactly. She's probably out there chastising me right now. But this last clip that I wanted us to listen to really spoke to me on a personal level, because I, as a Twitch streamer, have some of the challenges that on a smaller scale that she goes through. So let's take a listen real quick.
I was just going to say, sometimes you have to get your ego out of the way. And I one time was in Puerto Vallarta, and the first show I'd done was sold out, and they said, well, you're going to do great from here on in. So I showed up the next night, like ready for another sold out show. And they were like, there's 12 people. And then they sold about up to 21 by the time I was ready to go on. They said, do you want to cancel? And I said, no, 21 people showed up. I'll give them a show. So I went out and did it. And then afterwards, this young girl came up to me and she said, my parents told me I could go anywhere for my birthday. And I chose here because I wanted to see your show. And I thought, oh my God, thank God I didn't cancel that show. So I always try to keep that in mind too. You never know who's in your audience who really needs to see you or your words or whatever you have to offer. You never know who's there to see you. And that
young girl's name, Michelle Obama. No, it was Amy Schumer. And she said, I'll start comedy now. Yeah.
Exactly.
So why this clip meant so much to me was that it's really asking yourself to let your ego get out of the way. You know, when you're potentially performing in front of an audience or, you know, sharing your creativity, you know, it shouldn't matter whether it's one other person or, you know, a stadium filled of people. You know, there are people there that are going to be affected by you in a positive way. And, you know, to take the time to acknowledge that you're out there to connect with people and you're making their day a little bit better by being yourself and expressing yourself in that creative outlet meant a lot to me. And it helped me validate, you know, some of the feelings I have sometimes, you know, while as a Twitch streamer, you know, I'm, you know, presenting myself, but that, you know, it's those small moments that may seem insignificant to me that might be much more impactful to somebody else. And that I need to not take those moments for granted because, you know, I'm looking to connect just as much as other people are. And that means something.
Yeah. I understand how important that is, especially during these times, and losing that connection with your audience. That must have been a real hard hit, I believe, for performers like Coco. So yeah, on my end, it's probably the most memorable part that I have in mind right now is when we had Emilia fart on, and it's mostly about the thing that it kind of aligns with the things Coco talked about when it comes to having an audience and perform, is that you sometimes succumb to fame and maybe lose yourself in it a little bit. So let's take a listen.
When I would visit Los Angeles and I would hang out with these people, it's not necessarily that anyone was like any of these social media people were cruel but I think just the feeling of understanding that like relevance is a currency, and it's a very direct currency, and it's not directly talked about, but it's very much felt. And that just experiencing that made me realize, like, okay, my intention with my life isn't, I love attention and I love that the game of YouTube was very fun before I felt it be so real, because in my regular life, nobody cares about anything that I do, like not in a bad way, in a very healthy way. They're not interested in this game. When I experience people who are very interested in the game and were very driven by money and fame, not that I don't like those things, because I do, but that's not, like, I want to make art. I really, really want to make meaningful art that does good. And that is what I want to do more than anything. And I think I realized that I don't think that YouTube or the way that I was, the trajectory of my life and the things that I really wanted, I realized that that's not in line with the fact that I want to make art that does some good and has meaning. So that's why I took the break and I regrouped, because I'm like, okay, I don't think it's not what I thought it was, or something, or I changed, or I don't know. But yeah, I almost was like, I just want to stop? And one day I'm sure I will. Everything will change at some point. but I also think at the same time, like, reality is pliable and things are what you make of it. So I'm not necessarily playing the same game I was. I'm not catering to an algorithm. I'm not catering to an audience at all. But I know that I'm starting to find a way to put out stuff that has the energy that I want to see in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this part stuck out the most for me because she was actually so conscious about this, the contrast and struggle between the need for validation, but also how being famous can be so destructive to yourself. And finding that balance is something that's really hard. And I'm so empathetic to her and how she has overcome it and really focused on herself in the end and managed to uphold her own identity throughout all this YouTube fame that's been going on, because that's a messy industry.
Yeah, I can only imagine, the experiences she has had, but being able to listen in and hear her evolution, and also, turning to a more authentic representation of how she wants her art and self-expression to be manifested on her YouTube channel moving forward was really inspiring. The fact that she, acknowledged what she wanted to do and unapologetically goes after it. I found that wildly inspiring as well.
Yeah. I'm really happy about all of these people and what they've contributed, not only to the podcast, but on a personal level as well. We did a good job, Scott. Seriously.
I think we did a great job. Especially for our first season, I'm just only looking forward to all of the wonderful people we'll be able to connect with and hear more from in season 2.
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna jump over to our end segment, so stick around for some questions from our listeners. Welcome back, guys. It's time for us to wrap things up with some listeners' questions. Take the lead, Scott.
All right, so we have 3 questions again today, and the first one comes from Chase, and the question is, Matty, if you could really sell your soul to the devil, what would you sell it for?
I would sell it for eternal life with the condition of being able to die. So basically like an elf, like I don't age and I get to live life for as long as possibly, but at least still having the thrill of knowing that I could potentially die if I got run over by a car.
Fair enough. So I feel like there's a lot of questions I have with that one, but we'll just maybe save that for a different time.
Save that another day.
Like, okay, so so when I read this question, like I promise this is not my like beauty pageant answer. Like I really did. This is like the first thing that crossed my mind. I would sell my soul to the devil for the ability for our world to exist in a positive way where money was no longer a required element. Just because like I feel like, so much of our lives are dictated by, how much money you have and whether you can afford to do certain things, and whether that's, the minute things like going out to dinner or being able to, have your favorite dessert every once in a while, up to something as substantial as your education or your healthcare. And I think that, if we could just all live in a society where that wasn't a concern anymore, it just didn't, like Star Trek, like the future where there's just no money necessary. That would be something that would be worth selling my soul for the devil too.
Why do you always have to have the best answers? Why? You sound so humble compared to me. I sound like a shithead. I'm selfish and I want eternal life. Meanwhile, you go, all All right.
I promise I was not going for the congeniality award. I promise I wasn't.
Sure. All right. Next question. You find a book and begin to read only to discover that it is your life. You get to the point that you are at now. Do you turn the page knowing that you will not be able to change the events to come? And this one is from Daniel.
So if I had a book in front of me that would tell me the rest of my life, but I couldn't change it, I would absolutely not read it, because it would drive me insane to know what's coming and then not be able to do anything about it, especially if it was something that I want to just do a facepalm for and just be like, why, Scott, why? So like ignorance in this very particular circumstance to me is bliss. I would much rather not know what's coming because I couldn't change any of it.
Yeah. You're going to get the same answer from me. I totally agree.
Yeah, it would just be lame to not be able to change any of it. Like for the cruddy parts, especially if you're like gonna die in a really silly way, like you know, I choked on a meatball, like, and that was the end of my life, and that was gonna happen in 2 weeks' time. I'd be like, well, this is silly. I can't change that at all. The heck?
Yeah, I mean, choking on a meatball sounds like the way I'm gonna die, being Swedish. So,
I mean, I didn't want to be prophetic for you, but you know, if that's how you feel you're gonna go after you sold your soul to the devil. You were granted eternal life, but 2 weeks afterwards you choked on a meatball and died. That's kind of, you know, that's kind of a lame way to go, right?
I don't mind choking. Let's
and moving on.
I just heard myself.
All right, so the last question is from Hannah, and the question is: in the event of a zombie apocalypse, what would your hand weapon of choice be?
Does this apply to like a shotgun, assault rifles, things like that?
Anything that can be held in your hand. You get to choose it, but yeah, it's got to be handheld.
All right, I think I would like a shotgun. I think.
Okay. Okay.
That's because it's usually my go-to weapon in like horror games. I sound so sane right now.
I mean, I understand. Hey, you know, if nothing else, every zombie game out there has taught us the shotgun is the preferred methodology to eliminate zombies. So I mean, you're merely a conditioned element of our society of video games. I think for me though, like I was thinking, my initial gut reaction was like a firearm of some kind. But then I was like, well, but like, what if I don't have easy access to bullets? You know, like just because you have the gun doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be able to always have the ammo for it. So then I was thinking like, okay, how about something then that would have repeated use with no ammo required? And I was thinking like, you know what? I want a giant mace, you know, just something that's like a bludgeoning weapon that you could do, you know, large damage to a lumbering zombie-like creature that could be used repeatedly with no sort of ammo. So I would go with a mace.
That's interesting. Very, very, very classy.
Yeah, just can you honestly picture me just like running around the street with a giant mace on my hand? I mean, come on now. I would die within 5 minutes. I would be one of the first victims, I'm sure.
Oh God. All right, we have reached the end of the show, guys. But before we end everything, Scott, what are your plans for Christmas?
My plans are pretty quiet and humble at the moment. I will be going back to my parents. It'll just be my parents and I for the holiday. You know, with the pandemic on, just got to keep that exposure limited. And so they're doing their social distance. And since I'm performing it as well, the three of us are going to feel comfortable spending time together and, you know, just being able to, in a small way, you know, welcome in the holiday and the new year. What about you?
I love that. I'm probably going to do this. Probably the same as I spend some time with my father. So it's going to be really, really cozy. My aunts are socially distancing right now. It's my closest family. So, yeah, it's not going to be what it used to this year for many reasons, but I'll make it nice. That. Absolutely. And yeah, so everyone, we will be back in January and we're going to take a little break. And hopefully you guys will stay with us next year too for our season 2, and we promise you that we'll give you just as much excitement as we did.
Even more. Come on now. Let's promise them more.
Even more.
Let's just
All right.
promise and let's over promise and under deliver. Wait, no, that's not how it's supposed to go. Under promise, over deliver. Okay, so we may or may not be back next year, and it may or may not be great. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's gonna be awesome. I feel it in my bones. It's gonna be an amazing season 2.
It will be. So, guys, if you want to keep yourself updated, please follow us at Queer as Pop on Twitter. Go to our webpage, Queer as Pop. You can find us on YouTube and Instagram as well under the same handle. And if you want to follow Scott, he's probably going to stream during the holiday seasons, I guess.
You bet.
You can find him under the handle Kilcannon on Twitch, and on Twitter you can find Scott at the Kilcannon. You can find me at Novakovic. And yeah, we just want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from the both of us, and see you next year.
Bye bye.